Alrighty. Well, thank you very much, Brenda, for finishing early, because I was actually a bit worried about how long we're going to spend on this, because I'm going to get a bit excited. So, preparing for retirement. So we'll just take a deep breath. Enjoy that sun. Is that sun too bright for you guys over there, or you're actually just enjoying it? Yeah, okay. All right. So what we're going to talk you through for this session, sorry Brenda, what time have I got till? 3? 3, awesome. So what we want to do is we want to understand some of the pre-retirement strategies, and once again, this is about trying to get across to you some of the things that we think about, and more specifically, I want to actually point you to some of the key pieces of data that are actually in a client's information that prick my interest and actually start kind of the cogs turning as far as, oh, we need to think about that strategy, we need to think about that. So I just want to give you a little bit of insight. So it's almost like I'm opening up the top of my head and you're just going to peer inside for a little bit. I know that's scary, but I want this to be a little bit fun, right? So we want to understand pre-retirement strategies. And as I said to you earlier, I'm a bit of a geek about this sort of stuff. So I love getting out my spreadsheets and sort of working out how can we actually get the absolute most out of any opportunity that we've got. Understanding Centrelink. Now, Centrelink opportunities, particularly when you've got spouses that are different ages. Now, and I've got the accountant in the room who I've helped their client with this, so I'm just going to give a bit of an example and you'll know who I'm talking about. But just because you might have a client that has a fair bit of wealth doesn't mean that they may not be eligible for some Centrelink pension for a period of time. So don't close down your mind on the opportunity of a Centrelink age pension, for example, just because they've got some net assets. I'm going to walk you through this case study which demonstrates that. But this is not based on real data, but it's based on some of the ideas that I've used in real life cases. And I've now done this a number of times. And I'll actually share with you, because I've got the extra 15 minutes that Brenda gave me, I'll actually share with you the fact that I actually overlaid that with the fact that how many of your clients might be retiring, and if they've had a business, they've got a bucket company that might have some retained earnings in it. How many of you kind of have that situation come up? And then the idea or the strategy could be, hey, we're going to bleed out the dividends out of this bucket company over a number of years and get you some tax refunds, yeah? So this is a very common accounting strategy. I'm here to tell you that there is an overlay on that, and that is, how do you think about that particular, I'll call it asset, even though there's actually nothing physically in that company potentially? How do we think about that and overlay the Centrelink thing at the same time? So yeah, this is where I geek out, because it's like all of these different elements all coming in. It's good fun. So we want to talk about that. I want to talk about understanding the different strategies that, once again, it's about this overlapping, because it's not one strategy. Anyone can just look at one strategy for a client, you know, make some extra contributions, blah, blah, blah. My view and our view is that the real skill comes from being able to see a situation and be able to see the multiple strategies and how they layer over each other. Because, of course, every time you get an advantage from one strategy, if you can have a second or a third strategy that layers over the top, then you're starting to really leverage your benefits, which is what we're wanting, okay? But some of the strategies will weaken some of the other strategies. So it's about understanding how they all interact with each other. So I'm going to just walk you through, by way of example, how some of these things might work and how you just have to think about them a little bit differently. And once again, as we've always talked about, sometimes you need to take a step back from the detail and actually think about what that person who you're in front of, what their actual needs are and what their overall holistic objectives are, before you just dive straight into what the specific strategies might be. Because you might be getting all excited about the fact you might be getting them a bit of age pension or something, but that might actually go completely against what their needs and their objectives are, okay? Now, I don't often come across people who don't like taking money off the government. That seems to be something that's a fairly popular strategy, money for nothing, or the whole concept that I've paid taxes all my life, it's time for me to get some back. You know, that's a fairly common approach and mindset. So any time where you can sort of weave that in can actually work quite nicely. Right, so there's 3 phases for retirement planning. Now, quite often, we don't actually start retirement planning, unfortunately, with people until the day they retire or the week or month before they retire, which means you've actually missed out on quite a bit of potential opportunity to actually get them ready for retirement. And this is where the retirement goal setting part of the timeline starts. Ideally, you want that to be around 10 to 15 years away from retirement. Hey, if it can be earlier, that's even better. But I actually almost talk about people in their late 40s to early 50s is where I want to be seeing them and talking to them about retirement goal setting. That process may not even lead specifically to financial advice or having to go down that path. But what it's about is them starting to visualise what the possibilities for them are, and for them to start crystallising in their mind what are their goals and objectives. When do they want to retire? Will they be okay? We use a projections process, which is basically a tool that basically lets us plug in, here's what all your details are at the moment, here's what you want to spend money on in your retirement. You know, for me, it's holidays, food, holidays, wine, holidays. So for any of you who watch my Facebook posts, you'll know this to be true. For others, it might be, I want to help my kids. I want to help them buy their first home. I want to do something in relation to philanthropic stuff. Whatever the thing is, we want to be able to model that so that they can actually see how that fits into their broader decision-making processes. So without labouring this point, because we will move on from this, I have a belief that by simply giving people targets and goals to work towards that are, you know, I'll call it mathematically correct and have some basis on fact, you will improve their ability to get there by double. If you just cruise through life and then you get to retirement, you'll get to retirement with whatever you have. But if you've got a goal or a target that you're working towards, I reckon you'll almost double what you're going to have when you go to retire. That's what's possible. Now, the worst case scenario, and let's just say that they pick a number. Oh, I need $3 million to retire, just out of the blue, right? That's what we come up with because that's the lifestyle that they want. And we mathematically work out that, okay, yes, you've got to work till then in order to do it, and you need to earn this much, and you need to spend this much, and yes, you can do all these things in the meantime. Let's say that they don't get to the $3 million, but they get to 2.8. They're still probably at least $1 million closer to that target than what they would have been if they didn't have a target to begin with. Okay? So this is probably my belief system, is that that is actually a really important part of the retirement process. Now, that's enough for that. The pre-retirement planning process is when you're getting very close to your retirement. So this is the, 6 months, year, 2 years out from retirement, and you're now actually getting a little bit crystal clear on, okay, well, this is exactly when I'm looking to retire. This is the example that we're going to go through now. The retirement planning is then once you've retired, and making sure that you're doing things and living in a way that you're not going to run out of money. That process might include things like having discussions with your client about the fact that they want to gift money to their kids. The amount of times I hear this from my clients, I want to help them with their first home and what have you. There's some wisdom that needs to be shared with clients at that point, in my opinion. And that wisdom is sometimes it's best to actually let the kids do their thing before you tell them you're going to gift them something. Because so many of my retiree clients who want to do this, the anecdotal evidence that I've heard is that their intent when they say they want to be able to give these gifts when their kids go and buy their first home or whatever, is that they don't want them to go into that with their, debt up to their eyeballs, not being able to put curtains on or put carpet on or buy furniture or whatever. They want them to have a bit of buffer when they go into that first home. Not like what we did when we first started and we had 2 years where we had sheets up on the windows because we couldn't afford curtains, all that sort of story, right? Now, that's their intention. However, what finishes up happening, because what you've got to remember is that this is a completely different generation and their belief systems and values are very different from their parents' generation. The parents' generation were possibly a lot more careful with money. They were fearful of debt because how many of us remember those times? And I'm feeling like, and thank you very much, Brenda, for actually pointing out how old I feel, because I actually remember when the pre-99, when that all came in. It makes me feel very old. Clearly I was 10 at the time. But what happens is, so how many of us remember when interest rates were 17, 18, 19%? Yeah. So we have, because of that experience, we have a fear of debt. The generation that's coming up now, we've got interest rates on home loans at, Sal, are you in the room? Where is Wilson? No, he's Sal. Home loan interest rates are sort of, I'll call it sub 6%, say around 6. And that's high interest rates, okay? But it's because we're coming off record lows that were actually low for quite a substantial period of time. It was unrealistically low. It was never going to stay at those levels. But people who've grown up in that environment, that's their reality. They don't have any experience with interest rates at those high levels. Therefore, they don't have the same fear of it that us that have experienced the higher interest rates have. So you've got to understand that there's a completely different mindset at play here. So for those clients giving this gift with that intention, it backfires, because what happens is the kids say, oh great, mum and dad are going to give me $100,000. That means that I can go and spend $200,000 more on the house that I was going to buy anyway. So instead of buying something for $800,000 that I knew that I could afford because I'd done all my numbers and crunched, and gone to my loan broker and everything, and I knew that that was what I could afford, now because I've got an extra $100,000, I'm actually going to put myself deeper in debt. So it actually does the exact reverse of what they were trying to do. So it's about trying to impart those types of wisdoms, I guess, with your client where you can, because this is the first time they're going through this. We've probably been through it a number of times because we've seen our clients go through it. So make sure that you're trying to help your clients in those ways. That's the retirement planning phase. And yeah, we've got to do all the good things and, benefit recons and all that sort of stuff during that space as well. But what I want to focus on is the pre-retirement planning stage. One of the things that the projections process that I was talking to you about earlier, which is the modelling tool that we use to help with the goal setting stage, actually makes it really clear that there's essentially this, I'll call it 4 key elements to what is going to make your financial future good or bad. Whether you will be able to have your money last the distance or not, or whether you're going to have to, go on a cruise to some tropical location and throw yourself overboard once you get to a certain age because you've run out of money, okay? These are the 4 main elements. It's time. Time in retirement. Time working. Time in the market, not timing the market. So time is one of the critical factors. How much you're spending, obviously. how much you spend has actually got a huge impact on how long your money is going to last. Now, everybody kind of sits back and goes, well, duh, yeah, of course. But people don't actually crystallise how important that is until they see it graphically. It's interesting. Income. Now, when I say income, this is more about how much income you're earning along the way. That's separate to your investment returns, which are happening kind of in the background, okay? Most people don't want to go down this path of planning that far ahead because they're worried about the fact, or they feel like they don't have any power over this because it's all about their investment rate of return. And most people don't think they have any power over the investment rates of return. Therefore, they kind of don't want to acknowledge that. They don't want to delve into it because they feel very disempowered by that. I'm here to tell you that you're probably right. You probably don't have a huge amount of control over the rates of return because the market will do what the market will do. Yes, you can make decisions about what risk profile you are and where your assets are and all that sort of stuff, and that's fine. But really, that element, when you start looking at this projection process, that particular element, yes, it's one of the elements, but it's actually, in most instances, it's the smallest, it's the one that has the smallest effect on your long-term trajectory. So it's a really interesting process to actually pull that out and be able to show people that actually it's the things that you do have control over that will move the needle for your financial future a hell of a lot more than what the rate of return will. So it's an interesting take on it. Let's jump into a case study. Demi and Bruce. Surnames to remain unnamed, but you can fill in the blanks, I'm sure. Okay, so in this particular example, we've got Bruce and Demi. 66 and a half is Bruce, so he's almost at pension age, isn't he? And Demi is 60. Bruce is already retired. Demi is planning her retirement now. Important thing that straight off the bat I get excited about and I go, oh, here's my spidey senses are going off. Look at that age difference. No, I'm not saying, oh, he's a cradle snatcher and, no, I'm not going to say that. This is about the fact that because they have a significant age difference, there is a potential opportunity. And this is where it comes to that Centrelink story, okay? And you'll see how that comes out shortly. So here is their essential assets, if you like. So they've got their family home. They've got an interesting one there. They've got a commercial investment property that Bruce owns a third of with his siblings because he's inherited it from his parents, okay? So that's an interesting one. I bet you know where I'm going with that if you remember my first session today. Cash that is available in their home loan offset account. And then they've got their home loan. Anybody making some interesting observations on that one? So the offset account is actually higher than what the loan is. Anybody who knows how offset accounts work will know that it will only really work effectively up to the amount of the loan. So in actual fact, they've got $20,000 that's actually sitting in a bank account earning zero because they've got too much in their offset account. So that's an interesting observation. Other lifestyle assets, they've got some cars, some boats, some there's all that sort of stuff. Another interesting fact, so here are my interesting facts that I'm kind of honing in on straight away. Commercial property. So once again, you can imagine I'm starting to think, oh, commercial property, could I potentially transfer that into super? That's an interesting one. The other interesting observation is the superannuation and the difference in their balances. Remember I was saying earlier about sometimes we want there to be a more even split in their super so that we can use the $1.9 million each. They're quite a way away from 1.9 million each, so that's probably not too much of a concern. But what this particular scenario looks like is once again another invitation to an interesting Centrelink exercise. Now, the other thing, and this is an interesting thing. Now, on face value, you would look at that situation, you'd go, excluding their home and lifestyle assets, because their lifestyle assets, to a certain extent, get excluded from Centrelink asset tests, okay? They've got $1.8 million. So how many of you would just go, oh, they're not going to be eligible for a Centrelink benefit at all, so forget it. Okay, that would be an absolutely normal reaction to that. But that's not necessarily the case. So let's talk through that in, not this slide, but there's a couple of slides in. So first of all, what are their retirement objectives? Okay, Demi wants to finish work at the end of June or mid-June. She has some long service leave and annual leave, and she's planning to just take that as a lump sum before she retires, so it all finishes up nice and neatly before 30 June. She's then planning to pay off the home loan, so that $50,000 home loan. She's going to use some of that lump sum that she's getting from a long service to put that into super, claim a bit of a tax deduction, great. She might also put some non-concessionals in for Bruce, because there'll be a little bit left over, so great, yep. And then start a pension for Bruce and Demi so that they can both start drawing down on that pension through their retirement. Then they'll access the low-income healthcare card for both of them at the moment, but as soon as Bruce turns age 67, he might be eligible for the Senior Australian Healthcare Card once he turns age 67. So that's in 6 months' time. Okay, so first strategy we need to think about. Is it a good idea for her to take her long service leave and annual leave as a lump sum? This is an easy one. Simple answer is no. In the majority of instances, I would recommend against that, simply because if you take your long service leave and annual leave as a lump sum, your employer doesn't have any responsibility to pay superannuation or 11% SG on that payment, whereas if you simply take your long service leave and annual leave and then resign at the end of that period of time, you've at least not only stretched that payment over 2 financial years now, but you've also been paid 11% superannuation on that payment that you would have otherwise not received. Okay? So that is not a financial planning strategy, it is not a financial product, therefore you do not need to be a financial planner to be able to share that with your clients. Okay? So straight away, we've just given them a tax saving of about $5,800 plus additional contributions being made to her super to the tune of about $2,500. Pretty easy get. Okay, so it's a good start. But let's not stop there. Super contributions. So this is where we go through our little contributions wheel, okay? And we look for where are the opportunities, where are the things we want to think about in relation to contributions that we could make. So we want to use $9,000 of Bruce's, what she was planning to give to Bruce as a non-concessional contribution, but we want to actually make that as a personal contribution for Demi, because in that 30 June 2023 financial year, she's actually got higher income. We want to reduce that while she can. We don't want to wait until she finishes to make that contribution. We want to make that contribution in the year where she's actually got income. And remember, she had $70,000 in the offset account. So it's not like they don't have the cash to be able to put the super fund money in, okay? So they can do that. So we absolutely should be talking to them about that. We then might want to treat Bruce's contribution as a spouse contribution for Demi so that she can get a little bit of a rebate. You know, that's probably not moving the needle a lot, but you know, every little bit helps. If they have a self-managed fund, then we may also look at putting more into Demi's super and using the reserving strategy. Now, is everyone familiar with the reserving strategy? Or do you want me to just give you a real quick brief on it? Okay, I'll take you through it. So the reserving strategy is really only available in a self-managed fund scenario. And essentially what it means is that you make the contribution in the month of June and So it's physically paid to the super fund in June, but it's actually designed to be for next year's contribution limit of the 27,500, okay? So what you do is you put the contribution in, and the super fund gets taxed at 15% on the receipt of that contribution, because it's still a personal concessional contribution, but the super fund chooses not to allocate it to the member until the 1st of July. There's a little clause in the Act that basically says that the super fund has 28 days to allocate the contribution made to the member. We are simply taking that option. So it's gone in, which means that the member has paid it to the super fund has receipted it, which means you get the tax deduction. But because they're not allocating it to you until the July, the allocation of it towards your concessional contribution cap doesn't happen until the following financial year. So it's almost like you're getting a double dip. In fact, you are getting a double dip of your concessional contribution limit in that 1 year. Okay? Now, would you use this all the time? Absolutely not, because I've got Emma in the back of the room who can attest to the fact that this is really painful to actually get done. Not because of the legislation or the rules, but because the ATO seem to be completely unable to cope with it. Okay? The process does involve, having a form that you then give to the tax office. We find that it's best if you actually upload it to the portal, but then you tend to have to upload it 5 times or something before they'll actually process it. You'll get excess contribution notices that you'll have to fight them for. It is effective, but I'm just saying, prepare yourself, it's not all that straightforward. So it's easy, but it's not simple, okay? Or is it the other way around? Anyway, you get my drift, okay? So reserving you use sparingly, but particularly where it's someone's last year of work or there's a particularly large tax event like a capital gain or something like that, reserving strategy is a nice one to have in your pocket. But once again, just to clarify, you can only really use it for a self-managed fund situation, and you just need to, there's a really careful lot of steps that you need to go through in order to make it work, okay? So, benefits of making these changes to what their original plan was. Obviously, it's all about making more tax-effective use of our contributions. We've got additional personal tax savings of about $10,500. Fund pays an extra $4,500 because obviously it's taxing at 15% more, but we've still got a net saving of about $6,000. This is where there is a lot of instances where we're doing a quote for a client for a financial plan, and there's so many times where I'm able to say, you know what, my fee, you're not even paying my fee, the tax office is paying my fee, because I'm saving you all of these amounts with our strategy in the first year. It's really, it's costing you nothing, okay? Then we've also got, a spouse contribution rebate of $540 as well. So all of these things start adding up, and I'm hoping that what you're starting to get a feel for is it's cumulative. This is not just one strategy on its own. There's all of these things that are adding up along the way. Okay. This is a quite common question that you will have with people when they retire. They will ask you the question, should I pay off my home loan? Or should I put that money into super, or should I do something else with it? What should I do in relation to my home loan? I've got a live one at the moment where she's got a home loan of $180,000. She's got super of, call it $650,000. So in her mind, she's like, well, if I take the money out of my super, paid off my home loan, I'm going to be debt-free in my retirement. It's just easier. Now, for her, that particular client that I'm talking about, for her, it actually blends into the Centrelink strategy I'm wanting to achieve for her as well. So in actual fact, yes, paying off the home loan is actually a really valid strategy, particularly with the interest rates where they are at the moment. When interest rates were 1.5%, you could imagine I wasn't that excited about paying off the home loan. But it depends on what you're trying to achieve as well, okay? So In this case, it's do you pay off the home loan or not? Do you leave a balance in the offset account, or is it better to have the loan still in place but with a redraw facility? Does everyone understand the difference between the offset account and a redraw facility? Okay, yeah, I'm getting a lot of nods. Really, really quickly. Offset account is literally, there is a separate bank account that offsets against what the balance of the loan is, and you only pay interest on the home loan depending on what the difference is between those two numbers, okay? But it is clearly a loan account and a separate bank account. It's just that they're linked for this calculation purpose, okay? If you've got a redraw account, then you don't have that separate bank account. Your loan account is simply less, but you've got the ability to draw back down on it if you need to later. Those two options as far as how much interest you pay is probably going to be fairly similar. The difference though is in how it is measured as an asset or not for Centrelink purposes, which is very different between the two. Even though it might be an offset account and it's offsetting a loan, from a Centrelink perspective, that offset account is an asset that will count towards the assets test. And the home loan will not reduce what those assets test are, because the home loan is, I'll call it offset against, it's encumbered on the home, and the home is not an asset for Centrelink purposes. Therefore, the loan doesn't reduce your asset test, okay, calculation. Now, the value of looking at this home loan question also comes down to the psychology of it. There is a lot of people who will simply have this massive peace of mind associated with having the loan gone. However, I always like, if you've got a home loan, I always like to keep something in there with the redraw available, because it's kind of a nice backup position or a safety net if they need cash in a hurry for some reason. We've all had experiences. I've got the things going on at the moment at home where I've had to have the whole top balcony resealed and regrouted and what have you, $20,000 later, and it just came out of the blue. I still maintain that it was probably got to do with the earthquake that we had 12, 18 months ago? Maybe 2 years ago. I reckon it's just shaken everything, and all the mortar in the upstairs balcony is just not quite right anymore, and yet it had been fine for 50 years, but now it's leaking. So, you know, stuff like that happens, okay? So being able to have an emergency pot of funds is a great idea. If you're looking at a Centrelink strategy, it's often better for that to be in the form of a redraw available rather than in an offset. The other thing that I've also always been careful about is I find that the offset account can be a bit of a trap. And this is, once again, just seeing how most people manage their money. A redraw facility tends to be healthier from a personal finance, I'll call it, perspective than what an offset account is, because the offset account tends to be a little bit too easy to get access to. It's a little bit too easy just to dip into for things that maybe if you had to actually draw it down off the loan, you'd hesitate a bit more, okay? But that's a bit of a financial personality thing, and very much a psychological, I'll call it almost assessment that you make of your client. But can I tell you that 95% of the population don't work very well with offset accounts. They're not very disciplined with their money if there's an offset account there. But that's just an observation. Obviously, you might want to keep the loan there in case there's investment opportunities that arise. However, once people are in their retirement phase, that tends to be not the reason why you'd have it. It'd be mostly as for that emergency funds concept. Okay, strategy number 4 to think about is the in-specie transfer of assets. So we've got this property that Bruce has inherited from his parents. It's worth $200,000. It's commercial property. We talked about this morning. We'd need to make sure that it's at market value. We'd want to make sure that it's actually used in a business purpose. All of those types of things, and we need to think about the capital gains on it. Stamp duty on it, possibly, or not, depending on what state you are and what the circumstances are, but there's some considerations there. However, with Bruce, even though there might be a capital gain on it, because Bruce has been retired for a few years and he's under the age of 67, we have got the opportunity to offset any capital gains that we have by using the catch-up contributions. Because remember, his balance in super was actually about 360,000, so it's well under the $500,000. So he's satisfying all the criteria to be able to make a catch-up contribution. So this might be an opportunity for us to do that. So what's the value of doing it in this way? Well, instead of him, if the rent on that property, he would be able to receive that at either 15% tax on the income inside super, or if he's in pension mode, 0%. This is the probably more important one, is that the future capital gains on that property could be as low as 0%. Maximum 10%. But possibly, and very possibly in this instance, in fact I'd almost say definitely in this instance, you'd be talking about a 0 tax rate on any future capital gains. Okay, so this is where the real long-term advantage comes in. It also could help us with our age pension eligibility strategy. So all of these things start layering up. Okay, next one to think about is starting pensions. Pensions/Centrelink. So this is where we're looking at both at the same time. So they had said to you, hey, and we need to start a pension because we're going to use that to fund our lifestyle. They were assuming that they were going to start a pension for Bruce and for Demi. But we don't need to do that necessarily. We need to think about what is the best way forward. So if we were to only start a pension for Bruce and not for Demi, then we might be able to apply for an age pension for Bruce for Centrelink once he turns age 67, and I'll show you in a minute how the assets are going to be assessed for Centrelink purposes in that instance, okay? But the benefits of us only starting a pension for Bruce rather than for both of them is that he will be eligible for an age pension. Because Demi's superannuation monies don't count as an asset for that purpose if she's under the age of 67, so long as she hasn't started a pension. If it was in pension mode, then the asset counts, but if it's still in accumulation mode, it doesn't count. So that is going to make a massive difference to this overall picture. Obviously, the earnings of Bruce's component of the fund is going to be then at 0%, but you would be paying tax at the 15% on Demi's proportion of the super fund. So you need to weigh up what the benefits are for the Centrelink pension versus the detriment being her not actually having that 0 tax rate inside the super fund. So here's what that same slide that we had before of here's all their net assets. Here's what the assets would be in this particular example if we transferred the property, so we transferred the commercial property into the super fund, but we transferred in under Demi's name, if you like. We've still got we've paid the home loan down. Now, we may not have paid it off. We might have left it with a $1,000 balance or something. But in this case, just to keep it simple, we've paid the home loan off, which means we've now only got $20,000 being counted in the offset account. Now, the reality is some of that's actually gone into super contributions and what have you. So some of these numbers might be a little bit different, but I just want you to get the feel of this. So we've then got Bruce's super that is counting, but we've got Demi's superannuation balance that is not counting. We also have other lifestyle assets, i.e. cars, etc. They still count as an asset for Centrelink purposes, but the family home, you'll notice that I've got $10,000 being assessed for Centrelink there. That's because of the fact that you want your home and contents will still count, but for most instances, Centrelink aren't going to argue too much with you if you've got a couple in a house and the amount that you put down as your home and your contents, basically value, is about $10,000. They're not going to go and check it, okay? Question up the back.
The commercial property that you've transferred in, did you transfer that into Demi's name?
Yes.
And is that a gift?
Yes.
So
Essentially, yes, it's a gift, but it's basically a non-concessional contribution.
But for Centrelink purposes, is that still going to be a gift, the 200,000 going to be a gift?
No, interestingly. No, because it's a contribution to super, which doesn't count as a gift, which is odd, but no, they don't count that. Sorry? Say that again? Yeah, it was still disposed of, yes, correct. And it was disposed of, and it's a non-concessional contribution for Demi. And because what you're normally looking at in the gifting rule, it's gifting to someone other than you and your partner. Okay, because they're kind of looking at the couple and their assets. So yeah, good question though. So what we're finishing up with is for Centrelink purposes, we've got $480,000 as the assets. Now, in order to get the full pension, I did have those on my notes and I just can't see it on the slides here, but I think that the limit is 450-odd thousand, okay? So it's a smidge over what the Centrelink full asset limit is. If you really wanted to tweak this a bit, you could probably transfer some more money out of Bruce's name into Demi's and get him the full pension if you wanted to, okay? So, tax savings, we've got $1,500 in the fund. Age pension could be anywhere between $9,000 and $19,000, depending on how far you wanted to tweak this example, okay? The age pension also gives Bruce $2,000 worth of other advantages that are not actually in the form of a pension. So things like discounts on your electricity bills, discounts on your rates, discount on your car regos, just stuff like that. It's actually quite valuable. Now, take all of those advantages, you've got to take the disadvantage off that. Now, the disadvantage is that Demi's proportion of the fund is not in pension mode and therefore is being taxed at 15% rather than at 0, and that's probably going to be costing them about $7,500 a year. But what you can see there is definitely a net benefit associated with that. Now, how long are we going to have that benefit? Well, literally, we're going to have it for, 7 years? Until Demi reaches age 67, then regardless of whether she actually turns her pension on or not, her superannuation will count towards their assets at that point in time, which means they are then no longer eligible for anything from the age pension, unless they spend it all in the meantime. So that is kind of part of this process that we need to go through. Now, given that I've got a little bit of time, I'm just going to go back and just talk about how we use... Can we just go back a slide? Have we got any... Can we go back one slide? I can't get my machine to do it. Thank you, Ta. So, just to layer over the top of this, you may have the concept of the bucket company, okay? Where you've got a bucket company, that company's shares, or the value of the retained earnings, if you like, will count as an asset for Centrelink purposes. In those instances, the thing we need to be really careful of is not so much the assets test as much as we do the incomes test. So the example that I was working on with this other client was that they had a bucket company that was worth about $250,000. It was basically being dripped out in the form of, they'd put a Div 7A loan account in place and they were doing a drip out, and there was going to be dripped out over 7 years, okay? So not an uncommon strategy. My problem was that the dividends being declared, even though it's only their money and it's all recycled and it's all just paper money, let's call it, was going to destroy my Centrelink strategy, because that income, even though it's only paper money, Centrelink is still going to treat as income the dividend that is being declared from that private company, because the way that they do their test for incomes test purposes is if you've got a private company, they will either take the deeming amount of whatever the assets are that are in there, which might be, 2.5% of, or 3.5%, or whatever the thing is. So that wouldn't have been a problem if it was just the deeming, or the amount of dividend that you've actually received from that company, whichever is the higher number. Okay? So what we needed to do in this instance was, if we were going to do that drip out over 7 years, we were going to miss out completely on this age pension for that 7-year period. So what do we need to do? We don't want to have all those dividends coming out, but we also need to make sure that we've satisfied our requirements as far as Div 7A are concerned. So in that particular instance, what we did is we actually put money into the company to replay the Div 7A loan, so that now the company has investments. It actually has an investment portfolio inside it for the $250,000, which is equivalent to what the retained earnings is. And the idea is now, let's just put that in place, let it vegetate over there for the next 7 years. Then in 7 years' time, we're going to then start the dividend flow coming back out again when it no longer is going to impact them negatively from the Centrelink perspective. You with me? Okay, so there's layers upon layers upon layers that we're thinking about here. So we're thinking about the Div 7A, we're thinking about where the assets are being invested, we're thinking about how the superannuation rules together, and we're thinking about how all of this interacts with the Centrelink rules at the same time. Okay, anybody got any questions on that right at this point in time? What do you reckon the objections might be to that strategy? Have you got any thoughts on that? That having to have the cash to put into the company, absolutely. But if the difference is, well, you can either have it in super or you can have it in the company and we'll bleed it out, it's kind of 6 of one, half another. It's just where it is. The extension to that, because it's a really good point, is the concern that the client will have about the fact that, well, hang on, if I keep it in super, it's going to get taxed at either 0% or 15%. If I have those same investments over in the bucket company, it's going to be effectively taxed at 30% on those earnings. Yeah? Are we concerned about this? I'm not. Why? I'm not concerned about it because, and this is a good terminology to use with your clients, particularly when it comes to bucket companies. Yes, you will be paying 30% tax on that income in the company. However, it's not a final tax, because our strategy and our plan is to then bleed it out to you over a period of time and actually get that back in the form of tax refunds. So you get the terminology of it's not a final tax is a really good one that the client will understand. And that is how that competes with, or complements, if you like, your superannuation strategy. Because if we do it that way, we then secure the Centrelink pension, which is going to give you these other advantages over here. Yeah? Excellent. How much fun was that? You can imagine the spreadsheet I had on that. And some of my team are at the back going, yeah, I've seen it. Okay, other benefits or recontribution strategies. Now, we've talked about the fact that we may have wanted to put that property in under Demi's name instead of under Bruce's name, and they are all really valid. It might be that some of the timing of these benefit and recontribution strategies won't be the dates that we've got here, but nevertheless, you still need to plan those things out. So in this case, regardless of what we're doing as far as the property goes, we've got $440,000 worth of non-concessional contributions that we can make for Bruce. We can pull it out and put it straight back in again and basically just freshen it all up. I know my clients get a little bit nervous, and I always check to see, we did sweep the room for bugs before we started, didn't we, Brenda? Thank you. Is that benefit recontribution strategy is kind of like laundering money, except that it's legal, okay? And it's completely okay, and the tax office have signed off on it, it's all fine. but you're actually, I would have to say that you're almost being negligent by not looking at this as an opportunity for your clients, because of the fact that it not only essentially can eliminate some of the death taxes associated with superannuation, but in this day and age where the government, we know, is looking for any opportunity to tax superannuation where they haven't before, if we can actually increase the amount of tax-free elements inside someone's components, I think that what it's going to do is secure the fact that they will have less impact, even if the government were to change the rules and actually make pensions coming out of super for over 60s taxable in some way, shape or form, because that would be a really easy button for them to flip. It will lessen the impact of that very dramatically. But the majority of instances, what people tend to be more excited about is the fact that this is going to save their kids X amount of dollars of estate taxes, okay? And it's really easy to quantify because it's literally 17% of whatever the taxable component is you're about to save them. That's basically what the potential is to save their kids. And they're usually pretty excited about that. Now, they're not always, because I've had a few clients that are basically saying something to the effect of, mate, they're getting enough when I'm gone. They can deal with a bit of tax, so I don't care about that. And that's fine. But my approach is, you're negligent if you don't at least bring the opportunity to them. If you don't talk to them about it, then there's a gap, okay? So make sure you keep talking about it. And don't forget that you can actually do in this case, we've talked about Bruce and doing $110,000 prior to 30 June, then doing another $330,000 after 30 June, because as long as you don't trip the $110,000 limit in a year, because as soon as you trip it, you go into the 3-year cycle. And I know we've been caught out a couple of times on this in the past, and therefore you then make your $330,000 contribution in the following year and find out that you're actually in excess by $100,000, okay? And generally it's because the client has made another non-concessional contribution that they didn't even realise that they'd made, okay? So they weren't able to tell you. So our philosophy and our policy is, even though the limit is $110,000, we never go right up to that $110,000 limit because it's too dangerous, and you can so easily, we had one client where we literally went over that limit by $60, and it meant that we were $100,000 over the limit in the following year, okay? Now, because the penalties historically haven't been too bad, because the deemed interest rate was pretty low, so it was more of an annoyance than anything else, because by the time they sent you the notice and said that you had to pull the money out, you were pretty much through the 3 years and you can put it straight back in again, okay? But now that interest rates are going up, that penalty factor is also going to be going up. So we would just say that it's a really good policy just to keep your powder a little bit dry and not overdo it by going right up to pussy's bow on those limits if you're using these techniques. Okay. Benefits. So in this particular instance, by doing those benefit and contribution strategies for that, I'll call it that 3-month window, we would have been able to save the kids about $112,000 in estate taxes. This is where being able to quantify in dollar terms what the potential savings are is actually quite a powerful thing to be able to present your clients with, okay? Okay, so this is the Centrelink strategy. So once again, rather than recontributing for Bruce, we could put $200,000 or that property going into Demi's name, which is what I was talking about earlier. It would reduce the recycle that we'd be able to do for Demi, but for Demi, we can do that recycle in another 3 years' time, and then again in another 3 years' time, because we've got right up until age 75 to be able to do that. What it also means is this is probably where it comes down to the idea of having multiple pensions, is once again makes these types of strategies even more effective, because the next time 3 years comes up, you can pick the pension or the accumulation account that you want to do that recycling strategy with for maximum benefit. Okay? So multiple pension strategies is essentially that what you do is you have it all in accumulation mode, you pull the money out, you start the pension, if you like, with what is left, then you put the money back in, there's your new non-concessional contributions, then you start a pension with that new money, which means pension number 2 is 100% tax-free, but pension number 1, which is what you start with, might be, call it 90% taxable, all right, whatever the percentage is. Then in 3 years' time, you then say, well, I'm going to take another $330,000 out of pension number 1 and start another pension or add it to pension number 2, like combine them, because that's the tax-free pension, okay? So that's where the multiple pension strategy, and this is where some of these strategies can sometimes be laid out for the next 10 years till you get to the point where, you know, most of their superannuation balance might be in tax-free mode, which is pretty cool. As I said, for DEMI, all it does is it defers the estate planning benefit for another 3 years. It doesn't take it away, it just defers until we start to see that come through. But it's all about, once again, looking at this holistic picture and looking at all of the things that we're adding up. So, net increase in age pension by at least $7,800 by simply putting that property into DEMI's name rather than into his. And there'd be an additional superannuation fund tax of $1,200, so net benefit of about $6,500 per year for that 6-year or 7-year period of time. So then, of course, we've got the future benefit recontribution strategies that we would do in 2026, 2029, etc. And for both of them as well, up until when Bruce then hits age 75. And funnily enough, once you actually get to past her age 67, you can then actually start pulling money out of hers and putting it into his and hers in the same year. Because at that point, his is already fully tax-free, so there's no value in taking more money out of his. So this would actually be more of a strategy of take it out of hers, put it into both of theirs. Okay, so you're still getting $660,000. It's just really about, well, number one, they need to be okay with the fact that he's now going to have more of her money. So, which once again, don't just assume that they're going to be okay with that. I've actually had one client who they had they'd been married for all of their lives. They had one child together, but they had very much a my money, your money kind of mentality. It was funny because up until she retired, because he retired probably, 3 years before she did. Soon as she retired, and they were both retired, the whole your money, my money kind of went away. It was really weird. But this is just where making sure that you have an understanding of what's important to your client and don't just assume that that was what it was like last year. Don't assume that it's going to be the same next year. So just keep asking the questions, keep engaging with them about what's important to them, and if they've got those rules, don't be afraid to ask them if those rules still apply. And it's not judgmental, it's just that, hey, if those rules still apply, it means that there's these strategies that I can't use for you. Whereas if they don't apply anymore, or if you're relaxing your thoughts on it, we can do it this other way. The thing I did with that particular couple is we actually just set up a spreadsheet. I know you're going to be surprised by saying that. Yes, Michelle set up another spreadsheet. But we actually had a spreadsheet that kept track of, even though the accounts in the super fund said that this was what their account balances were, I had a little separate spreadsheet saying, yeah, but he owes you that and you owe him that, so really the balances are this. It just made her feel fine, and that was okay. And then we moved on. And then once she retired, about 12 months after she retired, she said, oh, you don't have to worry about that spreadsheet anymore. It is what it is. It's all our money. I'm like, oh, thank goodness for that. So once again, you just got to kind of work with it, and each of your clients' personalities are very different, okay? Okay, future planning. So once again, what this actually has achieved is we've basically converted over that period of time $1.26 million of taxable components have been able to be converted into tax-free components. We have therefore future-proofed their income that they're going to receive from their pension from future changes to the superannuation pension rules. As I said to you, at the moment, there's this fabulous clause in the Tax Act that basically said, hey, if you take money out of super after the age of 60, it is tax-free. Don't even have to put it on your tax return. Forget about it. No tax. But that would be a very easy thing. And since they brought that rule in, and I know it's been in for a long time now, every year I wait for the budget to tell us that they're going to back that off. Because it just is one of those things, and at the time, I think if anybody remembers when that came in, so many people were saying, this just sounds a bit too good to be true. Okay, but it stayed for a long time. But I'm a bit suspicious. I like to future-proof against that if possible, so that's another benefit. But the main death tax saving in this particular instance quantifies at about $165,000. Yes, it's not their tax savings, but it's tax savings to the children. It's significant. These are significant numbers. So, add it all up. We've got estimated tax benefits for that strategy for those 7 years. That's about $23,000. We've got estimated benefit from getting the age pension more than what they would have otherwise, about $131,000. And estimated tax benefits from that estate tax saving, if you like, of $165,000. So grand total of $320,000 of savings. And you thought my fee was expensive? Okay? It pales into insignificance. And this is the thing. It's really hard for people to get a handle on because usually the numbers that they're looking at is that first line. Okay? It's about looking at this thing a lot more holistically than that. Opportunities for our clients. So, we have strategic advice that we can always provide. You can actually get financial planning, and I've got a number of clients that I actually help from a financial planning perspective, and I don't even look at their investments. Financial planning should be a lot more than just giving advice about investments or insurance. Strategic advice, in my view, is where the value can really be added. So, timing of when you retire, i.e. the long service leave, annual leave scenario that we talked about, all the different contribution strategies that are available, strategies about starting Centrelink pensions, benefit and recontribution strategies is something that absolutely you need to be on top of, and particularly given that rule has changed in the last sort of couple of years, that's probably a bit of an untapped opportunity in your client base. Anyone who's under the age of 75, you need to be looking at that. But remember, they have to be under the $1.9 million limit in order to take advantage of that, okay? That's their total superannuation balance as at the previous 30 June. So in this instance, we're now talking about 30 June 2023. If their balance was under 1.9 mil, then you can still put money in as non-concessional contributions. If, as you get close to the end of the financial year and you want to do a benefit and recontribution strategy, we have been known to pull money out of superannuation in the late months, late weeks of June, to then make sure that they then are under a certain limit and then put that same money back in July, even though the client, if we'd have left the money in, would have been over the $1.9 million limit. So, if they're really close to the mark, you can actually play those tricks potentially. But that one you have to do very carefully because it all depends on the value and where the market moves in the meantime. Okay, so you have to be very careful with that one. Multiple pension strategies we've talked about a little bit. That basically just accelerates the advantage that you're going to get from the benefit and contribution strategy. It also, even if you don't have the capacity to do benefit and recontribution strategy, it allows you to have more control over where excess amounts over the minimum pensions, where they come from. So if, for example, your minimum pension is $100,000 a year, but they want to take 120, well, you want to take the extra 20 out of the pension that's got the higher taxable component rather than the one that's more tax-free. Now, Emma, can I ask you a question here? What are we doing in relation to documenting that that is a choice that the client is making? Do you know the answer? Or Jason, either of you?
Okay. Yeah, look, documenting between pensions and lump sums and how it's been taken out.
That's it.
Yeah,
Yep.
pensions and lump sums, look, trying to stay on top of that by documenting it early,
Yep.
almost having a standing order in terms of that, like a standing sequence amounts above that should be taken. Probably with the withdrawal component of that now, which we might touch on in the panel, we've got a transfer balance cap reporting if you've got a pension and it's coming from the pension account that you need to contemplate and balance as well. So just taking it out, if it's coming from a pension account, is it a pension withdrawal or is it a lump sum?
Yep.
Because if it's coming back into super, you probably want it to be considered a lump sum to get it back into pension mode.
Yep, so you've got a number of different elements there. So they're taking more than the minimum. So the question then becomes, can we make sure that that's treated as a lump sum so that then reduces their transfer balance cap? Or, I know I've got a number of clients who we've got pension accounts, but then we've also got small accumulation accounts because they've reached their transfer balance cap, so we can't put any more into pension. So we might choose to have that excess amount, that $20,000, come out of the accumulation account instead. But what Jason was saying is it's important to make sure that we document that intention at the front end of the financial year and not do it retrospectively, because the tax office has got a bit of an issue about that. Okay, so it's really about have a minute when you're doing the year end saying, hey, and for next year, we want to take the minimum out of this one, and any excess over the minimums will be we would like to be treated as a lump sum coming out of my accumulation account, or a lump sum coming out of pension number 3, for example, or whatever, okay? So that's just a little piece of documentation. You don't have to have a separate process, just blend it into your year-end process if you've got a situation where you've got multiple pensions like that. It's a good policy. Okay. We've got 8 minutes. Any questions? Have we got any questions on the panel? Oh, come on, it can't be that straightforward, guys. Yes, we've got one down the front. Yep. Thanks, Arden. Yep. No, we need the microphone so that the people home can hear your question as well.
Right, so how are you then factoring in your quarterly T-bar reporting when you're doing all of this? Because you might not necessarily be on top of how much they've taken out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So how do you balance those two conflicting situations?
Yeah. So particularly now that we've got to do basically from this year onwards, we actually have to do the T-bar reporting quarterly, which is a bit painful because it just takes away some of our creativity. What I would actually say to you is that you're probably only going to really come up against these things probably in the last quarter, generally speaking, of the year. So you could probably let it go for the majority of the year and just clean it up, or have a bit of a review when you get to the third quarter. So if you're doing March, April, you might just have a little bit of a look and see where your pensions are at. I don't know whether you've got... who's using the BGL software? Can I have raise of hands? Yeah. So if you can use your the rules well so that it actually picks up the pension payments, then ideally you can actually see fairly quickly where they're at. And it might be that you just need to allocate some time to that in sort of March, April to see if there's anything there. But the big process probably happens in that last quarter in the majority of instances. But you'll usually have a fair idea for most of your clients, the ones that are pretty consistently just doing it every quarter, every month they've got a regular amount coming out or whatever, and the ones that have a big lump coming out, ideally you'd think that you'd know about that, okay? But yeah, probably something you need to be a little bit more focused on. But here's an idea. When in the year are you usually doing the accounts for the super fund? At the back end of the year? So when you're doing the accounts for the 30 June 23, have a look when you're doing the accounts and you're having the year-end meeting with them, which might be, let's call it, it's in March or April. Talk to them then about what their patterns have been up until that time to see if there's anything that might be coming up. So try to use that year-end meeting or that year-end process to actually look forward into the current year at the same time. That's probably your best practical approach, rather than actually picking the file up at different times, because we know that every time you pick up the file, it costs money. Anyone else? Okay. Well, the good news is that means that we get out for our afternoon tea 5 minutes early. Okay, so once again, we've got a half an hour break for afternoon tea. So let's get back here at 3:25. And we're then going to have a bit of a panel session where we've got a number of different questions. I know some of the things that are already ready for the panel session. We want to talk about the accountant's exemption and where we think that's heading. We're going to talk about the $3 million test for anybody who's interested in that. Once again, it's really important to have something meaningful when your client asks you these questions to be able to actually answer or to give them some feedback, because once again, it helps make you feel and look knowledgeable and it gives you something meaningful to say to them, okay? So enjoy the afternoon tea break. We'll see you back here at 3:25.